It began, like so many ruptures in the ordinary, with a distant horn line that refused to stay distant. I was hunched over an Excel sheet at the city tenant hotline, tracing another migraine of phone tower rent data, all those anxious orange spikes. Over time, made the office feel as stale as the law books lining its walls. Then the horn slipped beneath the doorframe, curling around my ankles like smoke. The melody nudged a memory I did not yet possess, a tune both bright as brass polish and sorrowful as an unpaid bill. I stood, letting my coworker Luis complain about the copier. The sound was moving, no, drifting, eastward, toward the old Stackhouse district, where the landlords wore tailored confidence and tenants signed leases with trembling pens. I shut my laptop, ignored Luis's raised eyebrow, and walked out with my coat half on. Outside, February mist clogged the street lamps, turning the city into wet tracing paper. Yet, the horn was clear, impossible to mistake for a car radio. I followed its echoes past vegan cafes and shuttered bodegas, finally stopping at the narrow excavation that used to be the Crescent Arms, a building recently razed to make way for luxury micro-lofts. Now it was a pit gridded by rebar, a crater in the city's memory. The tune rose from somewhere underneath. Every city has stories that survive eviction, and ours has the Gilded Husk Speakeasy, a basement club hidden beneath the Crescent Arms, back when the mail still arrived by pneumatic tube and the city's booze were soaked in bathtub gin. The legend says a jazz band played there nightly until a police raid in 1929. The raid was rumored to be a handshake with developers who wanted the lot for something grander than live music. The band resisted. The stairwell collapsed. Nobody made it up alive. The city shrugged, prohibition ended, and the floor above was paved with silence. I had always filed that legend beside haunted diners and alligators and sewers, true only if you needed it to be. Now, the impossible trumpet insisted otherwise. I knelt by the chain-link fence, my breath rising in little ghost puffs, and pressed an ear to the chilled metal. Then the drums joined. A crisp brushstroke rhythm, urgent but polite, like a man clearing his throat before testifying. A piano answered with tinny arpeggios that set my pulse jogging. Each note felt tailored to the present, as though the band had waited 90 years to comment on this very night. Street traffic rolled by, indifferent. But inside the song, I heard moving trucks unloading, roommates splitting rent 6 ways, mothers calculating which subscription service to cancel. The music contained them all. And as it crescendoed, my phone buzzed, an emergency tenant app push alert, eviction notices spiking citywide. I remembered something my grandmother, a garment worker and lifelong subletter, used to say when the rent was raised. Listen for the brass behind the bricks. I never asked her what it meant. Now I knew. I needed proof. I jogged 3 blocks to the municipal records office where I still had ID clearance from paralegal days. Night shift security waved me through after I produced a half-truth about missing tax documents. I headed straight for the microfilm room. City leases are supposed to be stable. Format, font, signatures, all stamped in the bureaucratic amber we call law. But that night, an entire shelf of microfilm 2020 leases was wrong. The margins danced, paragraph breaks slid like tectonic plates, and in the lower right corner of each document sat a curious treble clef watermark. It glowed faintly blue under the fluorescent lighting. At 1:17 a.m., the building trembled to a low-frequency rumble that wasn't an earthquake or subway. It was a bass line, walking 4 steady notes. Rent freeze, rent freeze. Ink rearranged itself on deeds. Evictions due next Thursday rescheduled themselves for sometime never. I wasn't hallucinating. A security guard entered to remind me to log out, stopped mid-sentence and blinked at the shuffling words. He took off his cap, scratched his scalp, and walked backward out of the room, as though trying to rejoin a timeline where paper didn't squirm. I cycled back to the pit. Above it, the mist parted like theater curtains. There were 5 of them, floating where the Crescent Arms basement had been. Translucent silhouettes in pinstripe suits and flapper sequins, each lit from within by a turquoise glow. They played as if the night were a record and they the needle. The clarinetist noticed me first. His eyes flickered ember red, but his grin was all mischief. The band leader, slick hair, cornet raised, tilted an invisible fedora. Then they bent into a bridge so lush I could taste juniper and burnt sugar. The song ended on a fermata held just long enough for silence to fall heavy as rent debt. Rent spike, the clarinetist rasped, the words formed by rustling leaves and distant sirens. We answer when summoned. And who summons you? I asked, aware how ridiculous it was to speak to air. The ledger does, said the pianist, a woman whose 1920s bob swayed as if underwater. When imbalance grows obscene, we are unshackled. Call it cosmic backbeat. Each syllable rearranged the street's graffiti into new letters that faded as soon as I blinked. I took out my phone, but the screen froze on a sepia smear of static. The bandleader twirled his cornet. But our set is short. We rewrite, then reseed. Balance restored, ghosts back on shelf. I wanted to beg them to stay, to carve their autograph into the bylaws until no landlord could whitewash it. Then I remembered the legend's cruel coda. The band's final performance had been interrupted. Maybe their haunting wasn't a hobby, but an unfinished song. Let me help you finish the set, I said, surprising myself. I was a mediocre alto sax player in college, but knew enough theory to ghost read. Close the loop so you're not dragged back whenever rent goes crazy. A hush. Cars hissed by, windows rolled up. The shapes conferred in a hush of cymbals and Morse code piano notes. The drummer leaned on an invisible snare. You must find our charts. They were seized as evidence the night we died. Without them, our encore falters. Where? Property crimes evidence lockup, the pianist said. But the city moved the vault. People forget the right stuff. Remember the wrong stuff. You'll figure it. And just like that, fog swallowed them. The street resumed being an ordinary gentrified corridor, the pit a pit again. But my chest hummed with borrowed chords. 3 hours later, I sat at Astrid's cluttered kitchen counter, explaining through mouthfuls of cold noodles. Astrid, my roommate and postgraduate in archival science, absorbed the tale with the same sober nod she used for exam rubrics. I've processed seizures from the old Vice Division, she said. Anything pre-1950 got boxed at the South Ferry Municipal Warehouse. That building's slated for luxury lofts next month. She gave a grim smile. Developers, always on cue. We better hurry. By noon, we were bribing a supervisor with coffee and an invented FOIA request. The warehouse smelled of dead air conditioning and budget cuts. Corridors stacked with beige boxes made me think of joiners stacking coffins. We navigated by year markings, 1928, 1929, Prohibition raids. Box 77B had a smudged label. Crescent Speakeasy, musical items. Astrid pried it open. Inside were scrolled charts, onion skin thin, edges browned. Though dormant almost a century, the ink looked wet. Notes slanted like reckless skyscrapers. Instruments were here too. A coronet dented near the bell. A clarinet mouthpiece with lipstick eternally red. Sheet music stands collapsed, but intact. The box had been unclaimed, the evidence never needed for trial once the dead stopped needing lawyers. Help me photograph, Astrid said, but the warehouse lights flickered. A drum brushed itself from dust beside us. On a silent count of 4, the coronet levitated, as if greeting its partner. Then horns filled the warehouse, though no human breathed into them. I saw Astrid's pupils dilate, her face lit by impossible stage spots. The melody was searching, incomplete, a question mark after every bar. We lugged the charts out the back fire exit before anyone could pen a memo. On the subway ride uptown, Astrid cross-checked municipal meeting transcripts. Public comment hearing tonight, she murmured. Developers lobbying to secure a final variance on those micro-lofts. If the band rewrites leases, maybe they can rewrite their motion too. That evening, City Hall's acoustics, marble, plaster, hushed indignation, were invaded by jazz. The council had just opened the floor to testimonies when the chandelier rattled. A piano cord unfurled like silk. Spectators gasped. Some suspected a flash mob, others the building's old pipes. The band manifested on the dais, ethereal but firm, music stands anchored to nothing. Council members froze, gavel mid-swing. The band leader raised his cornet, the drummer tapped hi-hat. Their ballads seeped into transcripts in real time, stenographers' keys clicking foreign words. Whereas the melody of dwelling knows no price ceiling. whereas eviction is a discordant bridge. Then the clarinet took a solo, each trill translating into retroactive clauses that capped rent increases at inflation, plus 1%, voided no-fault evictions, and established a municipal right-to-counsel fund. The audience shimmered between terror and awe, until developer lobbyist Mason K. Dunn stormed forward, face purpling. "Objection," he barked. "These entities aren't registered to testify." The pianist modulated to a minor key. Dunn's words turned to smoke midair. On the projection screen behind him, his own documents rewrote themselves. Stock shares converted to affordable housing grants. Quarterly earnings, remainders funneled into a ghostly trust. He spun, snatching at the vanishing text. We all watched the market recalibrate at the speed of swing, but the transformation slowed. Measures grew dissonant. The drummer glanced at the empty spot where sheet music normally rested. I understood. We had retrieved the charts, yes, but not yet returned them. "Encore stalls," the bandleader whispered, voice a muted wah-wah through his mute. "We require our parts." I sprinted to the rear benches where Astrid held the onion skin scrolls in a poster tube. We unscrewed the cap. Inside, the air smelled of cellars and gin. I raised the charts. They lifted from my hands like startled doves, fluttering to the bandstands. The musicians scanned them, nodded, counted off. What followed was a tonic major blast big enough to tilt the Earth's axis. Chords punched the rotunda's frieze, sending dust halos around each council member's head. Streetlights outside flickered in sympathy. And the music wrote, Article 1. Every lease shall be a duet, both singer and listener welcome to improvise, but neither permitted to drown the other. Article 2. Square footage is measured not in feet, but in conversations that fit inside. Article 3. A city neighborhood is a songbook. Removing pages diminishes the chorus. Article 4. Rent shall rise only to the tempo of human flourishing. The clerk's printer spewed pages already signed by the mayor, who sat 3 rows back, mouth agape. Eviction cases evaporated from digital dockets. Property portfolios updated with new columns called Community Equity and Nightly Applause. Mason Dunn shouted for security, but the guards were busy swaying, tears reflecting saxophone curves. One guard even unclipped Dunn's visitor badge and replaced it with a wristband that read, Listen. The song didn't just rewrite paper. Uptown, landlords woke to discover their hearts requiring new meter signatures. Compassion in 5/4 time. Downtown, tenants who had spent decades inhaling anxiety exhaled it at last in warm blue notes out apartment windows. Still, the band kept playing, as though their survival hinged on finishing every last bar. Then the building's century-old clock tower struck 10. The final note resolved on a soft, diminished 7th. Grief acknowledging hope. A collective exhale swept the chamber. Ghostlight washed off the band's shoulders, and they began to fade, but not before the drummer flicked a brush at me, as if handing over a relay baton. Keep time, he whispered. Then they were gone, leaving only the echo of cymbal wash. News broke like soda water, shaken too long. Papers ran front-page photos of empty space captioned, Spectral Swing Saves City Hall. Developers threatened lawsuits, but their contracts had rewritten themselves to include exit jazz languaging. This document may modulate without prior notice in defense of harmony. Court clerks shrugged. What could prevail against a clause that rhymed? The economy convulsed for a week, then settled on a new baseline. Rents cooled. Tenants found margin to chase hobbies, care for elders, even skip shifts to dance. On stoops across boroughs, impromptu jam sessions sprang up. People tuned their instruments to the key of the city's new charter, Be Kind Major. Yet, equilibrium is a fragile groove, and I feared what would happen the next time speculation's needle jumped the track. So, Astrid and I converted the tenant hotline's dusty storage room into a small listening library. We archived the band's charts, digitizing each measure, engraving metadata. Activated by rent spikes, 15% quarterly. We included disclaimers, handle with gratitude. Syncopation may occur. A month later, a courier delivered a small wooden box to my desk. No return address. Inside lay the dented cornet mouthpiece, polished to mirror shine. Etched around the rim were 4 words: "The encore is yours." That night, I climbed the fenced pit where Crescent Arms once stood. Construction had paused under Heritage Review. Rumor said the foundation was structurally haunted. I sat on a concrete slab and lifted the mouthpiece to my lips, though no horn accompanied it. A single hiss escaped, but the city replied with distant piano laughter. I sensed the band listening, trusting. Our city remains imperfect. Potholes, subway delays, coffee priced like gold leaf. But leases now carry rider clauses acknowledging melody as a legal force. Some call it the Harmony Amendment. Others call it impossible. I call it the moment when ghosts showed us that ink, like sound, can swing. We don't wait for the next spike. Every equinox, tenants and landlords gather in the renovated rotunda, now a public music hall. We play standards and originals, leaving blank bars for the unseen band to fill. Sometimes a trumpet riff materializes, airy yet sharp, reminding us the contract is still live. I've learned to keep time, not just in measures, but in rent, due dates met with steady dignity, in neighbors' names remembered. The brass behind the bricks, Grandma's phrase, was never a threat. It was guidance. Listen when walls wobble against injustice. The remedy might be a song. People ask why the band chooses economics over eternity, why they tether their afterlife to rent control of all things. I explain that a lease is a story, characters, setting, conflict, denouement. The band knows stories require revision. So do cities. If you're out late some night and you hear a faint cornet climbing the gutter pipes, don't assume nostalgia. Check the news, listen for numbers trying to rinse humanity clean off the ledger, then head toward the sound. Bring an extra chart if you have one. The rest of us will join before the bridge. Because music that rewrites contracts isn't an anomaly, it's a reminder. Every signature is a rhythm. Every street corner can be a stage. And every time greed tries to drown the melody, a ghostly jazz band stands ready to count us back in.